Good morning, greetings, and welcome to The Bright Side, your nutritional program dedicated to the understanding of the vast world of nutrition and nutritional supplementation. I'm your host, Pharmacist Ben, nutritional pharmacist from Boulder, Colorado. I use nutritional supplements where other healthcare practitioners use toxic pharmaceutical drugs and sometimes deadly medical procedures. If you suspect that there are natural nutritional roads to your health and vitality and well-being and to addressing your health challenges, whatever they may be, but you don't know where to begin, you have come to the right place. As you listen to The Bright Side every day, you are more and more in control of your body, you are more and more knowledgeable, and you know you can overcome any health challenge. That is why we are here every day on The Bright Side, helping clear up the sometimes confusing world of nutrition and nutritional supplementation. Over the last 33 years of practicing pharmacy, I have seen drug-free recoveries from diabetes, hypertension, obesity, skin diseases like acne, psoriasis, eczema, rosacea, digestive ailments, autoimmune issues of all kinds, recoveries that by the standards of modern medicine can only be called a miracle, but what is in the world of the body, what is in the world of biology, standard operating procedure. Because the human biological system is a healing system, it's a regenerating system, it is designed divinely to heal and renew itself on a moment-to-moment basis. And while some folks may call that a miracle, it really is just the way the body works. If you have questions about health, nutrition, prescription drugs, if you want to wean yourself off your meds and get on a good nutritional supplement program, if you have comments or success stories you'd like to share, questions about the longevity products, our Truth Skin Health products, we want to hear from you at 844-236-6010, 844-236-6010. If you want to purchase longevity products, go to brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com, or call 866-735-2470, 866-735-2470 for more information. You can also ask to ask about signing up to join the Brightside Ben team for a one-time $30 fee. You can be in business for yourself. Call 866-735-2470 or click on the Join the Team link at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com. Also, don't forget to check out our Truth Skin Health products at truthtreatments.com, truthtreatments.com, prescription strength products without the prescription. Prescription strength products were all formulated in my compounding pharmacy for healing the skin, now available for beautifying the skin, for preventing dry skin, for lightening the skin, for eliminating dark spots. If you're spending money on skincare products, folks, you're spending money on a lot of water and a lot of silicone and a lot of oil if you're not using the truth. Truthtreatments.com, and keep checking back because we got new products coming up and also new blog posts and information at truthtreatments.com, truthtreatments.com. Okay, welcome back to The Bright Side. We've been talking about this whole idea of memes versus mechanisms. We want to be critical thinkers. We want to be critical thinkers in our lives, but especially when it comes to our health, especially when it comes to medicine, when it comes to nutrition, nutritional supplementation, when it comes to all of the latest fads that are out there. So the information age, the unbelievable amount of information that's available to us these days is something like the amount of information that's available to us in an hour is the same amount of information that people would have in a lifetime, or even in a minute is the same amount of information that people would have available to them in a lifetime or lifetimes a mere 400 or 500 years ago. We are pounded with information. There's so much information, but that creates a dilemma. How do you know what to believe? You got to be critical thinkers. You've got to wield your critical thinking skills like a sword, cutting through the jungle of noise and misinformation and disinformation that's out there. Fake news. They call it fake news. Just by calling it fake news, now nobody knows what to believe. You've got to be a critical thinker in life. And more that's true, and especially in the world of health. In the world of health, how we make our decisions is going to determine in large measure how successful we are in the decisions we make. If we make decisions based on beliefs and conditioning and what authorities are telling us, we're going to be a mess. It's going to be chaos. And I talk to people all the time. They don't know what to do. I look at their supplement program, and it's got all kinds of various herbs and vitamins and nutrients with no strategy. They're just throwing things up against the wall and see what sticks. And it can be very frustrating because everybody's saying something different. You don't know what to do. That's why it's so important to be logical, to use critical thinking, and to accept personal responsibility for your choice making. This is true about us, by the way, and it's also true about medicine. Medicine itself, the doctor makes his decisions based on memes. And the promotion of the medical model is promoted. The promotion is accomplished by meme masters who are manipulating the doctors as much as they're manipulating the pharmacist, as much as they're manipulating the individuals. According to Dr. Theodore Dalrymple, who we were supposed to have on as a guest, it didn't happen. He was supposed to be on today. Maybe he'll be on in the next couple of days. Hopefully he is. He's a brilliant medical doctor, and he's an author, and he's a critic of the medical model, and he's written several books, numerous books, about this whole idea of being manipulated, not just being manipulated, not just the patients being manipulated, but the doctors themselves. In his book, False Positive, A Year of Error, Omission, and Political Correctness in the New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Dalrymple takes the New England Journal of Medicine to task, and he talks about, quote, errors of reasoning and conspicuous omissions, apparently undetected by the editors. But in some cases, there's reason to suspect serious conflicts of interest and even corruption, unquote. Dalrymple tells us all in the book and in all of his work. He says, take a constructively critical view of medical news and of medicine itself. And check this out. He says to be wary of the latest medical doctrines. The latest medical doctrines as well as old medical doctrines, cholesterol and sunscreens and beta blockers and salt isn't good for you. And this craziness in these medical dogmas. And by the way, dogma is not based on fact, and they are dogmas. And Dr. Dalrymple is a medical doctor himself, and he points this out. I've been saying this for decades. I first saw this in pharmacy school. I couldn't believe the stupidity, the utter biochemical ignorance of medical strategies. When I was in pharmacy school, I couldn't believe it. I saw people on antibiotics for long periods of time. When it's pharmacy 101. You never stay on an antibiotic for a long period of time. They're still doing it. I talked to a guy today who's a kid. He's 27 years old. His psychiatrist was giving him an antibiotic, minocycline, a really nasty one. His psychiatrist. And he was on it for years. He finally got himself off of it. He said, do you think it affected me? Heck yes, it affected you. It killed off your gut bacteria, which are intimately connected to the brain. Science, not meme. That's not science. That's hardcore mechanism, not meme. And he's been on it for years, minocycline. What the heck is this psychiatrist thinking? Oh, he probably read it somewhere by the minocycline manufacturer. In Dr. Dalrymple's latest book, he does this with psychiatry. His latest book is called, this is what we're supposed to talk to him about today. I hope we get to speak to him because he is absolutely brilliant. Theodore Dalrymple. His latest book is Admirable Evasions, How Psychology Undermines Morality, and this one looks at psychiatry. And he says that psychiatry is used to, quote, absolve us of responsibility for our misdeeds, vices, and failings, unquote. Now, that could be very dangerous to say. But you know what? I can't disagree with him. When we have an illness, we don't want to say that it's based on our personal responsibility. Something about humanity, human beings, that we don't want to take responsibility. There's fear that's associated with it, and that's a subject for a whole nother show or a discussion. Why we don't like to take responsibility. Nonetheless, we don't. And in the book, Dr. Dalrymple says that resistance to taking responsibility is manipulated. Oh, it's not your fault. We'll give you some nice Prozac and you'll be fine. We'll give you some nice lithium and you'll be fine. Now they got all kinds of drugs. Now they're giving people anticonvulsants for bipolar disorder. Anticonvulsants are among the most toxic drugs you could take, and they're giving it to people for bipolar disorder because people are led to believe that these mental health issues are diseases. They just happen to us and we can have them drugged away. I remember doing a talk about maybe about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, for a bunch of nurses, and they were all excited to have me speak about skincare, and somehow somebody asked me about Prozac, and boy, did I wade into a mess after I gave them my opinion to these nurses, and I'll tell you, I'll discuss that when we come back from our break. All right, I'm Pharmacist Ben, 844-236-6010 is our number. We'll return on the bright side right after this. Okay, we are back. back on the bright side. 844-236-6010 is our number, and we got a couple lines open for you. Let's see here. Oh my goodness, there is Dr. Dalrymple. How do you like that? Of course, they call me when I'm on the air, but we're just going to have to pass on that one. And then maybe we'll get Dr. Dalrymple on in the next day or two. He's an absolutely brilliant, brilliant psychiatrist. And he's got a whole bunch of cool books. He's a critic of the medical model. He's right in line with everything we've been talking about. A lot of what he writes is just right in line. I was real excited when his agent called and wanted to get him on. And hopefully we'll get him on this week. Anyway, in his book, Admirable Evasions, How Psychology Undermines Morality, he says that psychiatry has a tendency to, well, it doesn't have a tendency, it does, absolve us of responsibility for our misdeeds, vices, and failings. And he says that psychology and psychiatry have done a great damage to modern society by allowing people to avoid responsibility for their own actions, for their own decisions, and for, as he puts it, diminishing their ability for honest self-reflection, self-examination. This is what I'm talking about when I say being a critical thinker. We want to examine our actions. We want to examine the effects of our actions. Everything's just cause and effect. Now, in the quantum world, it's not quite cause and effect, but in our macroscopic lives, it's cause and effect. Our lives are effects of causes. Everything's an effect of a cause. Go back to the cause. That's what the triangle of disease is. It's going back to the cause. Always look for the cause. If you have an immune response, the cause is going to be an offending agent. If you have any kind of degeneration, the cause is going to be something's gotten into the body that's mucking up the works, or something's missing. It's one or the other, or both. Something's missing, or the wrong thing's gotten in. This is what it means to be a critical thinker. You walk it backwards. You deconstruct. In engineering, they call it troubleshooting. Another cool book, Seeking Sickness, Alan Cassels, Cassels. Medical Screening and the Misguided Hunt for Diseases. In this book, he talks about, Dr. Cassels talks about how the medical model loves to have a search for illnesses so we can find something. And it does this through medical screenings, medical testing. I saw a commercial, or I heard a commercial on the radio yesterday. It just amazed me. It was for a fibromyalgia test. It was for people who could prove to themselves they have fibromyalgia with this test. Question is, do you know if you have fibromyalgia? Well, now you can take a test. What are you talking about? If you have muscle pain, who cares if it's called fibromyalgia and if you have a test for it? Fibromyalgia is just your body's messed up. That's period. That's all it is. Our bodies are messed up. You don't need to have massive diagnoses and all these different screenings and testings. And just live a clean life and look for your symptoms. Live a clean life and look for your symptoms. People die with cancer cells in them all the time. Cancer comes and goes. You can have cancer, not even know it, and live a good, long life. Just because they happen to detect something doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you need to be chemotherapy for or have an organ removed for. Be a critical thinker. Do not do just what you're told, especially when it comes to your body. And this is not just psychiatry, and it's not psychology, it's all health. It's about health. We have a sick culture that is being kept alive by technology. Our culture is more and more, at least, being kept alive by technology, by drugs, by surgeries. Not the life force. The life force is the true healer. It's not the tools, not the technology that heals us. It's the life force that is the ultimate healer. In fact, the tools and technology are like jury rigging. They're like Band-Aids. They're like patchwork. They're like having baling wire keeping your bumper up on your car. The life force heals. The life force repairs. Tools can be helpful. Yes, they can be life-saving. I understand that, and sometimes you need to have tools. Sometimes you need technology. I'm not saying there's not a time for surgery, and I'm not saying there's not a time for drugs. I've said it often. Keep pain pills in your medicine cabinet. You never know when you're going to need a pain pill, and thank God we have pain pills. Antibiotics save lives. Absolutely. But nothing can touch the life force, or the divine force, if you like, same thing, for power and potency and true cure. Magical word, cure. It's not magical, it's natural. Cures are natural. The body cures itself. The body's a curing system. It's a healing system. How do we access this healing system? How do we access this life force, this divine force? Guess what? We don't have to. We are the divine force. It's in us. It's part of us. We just have to turn our attention to it and make correct choices. We have to live our lives in a certain way. We got to live our lives in a day-to-day way. We got to live our lives in a certain way. We got to make certain decisions. It's not complicated. And if you're sick and you're in pain, this is the most important news. This is the most important message. This is the most important idea in health that you'll ever hear. That through the decisions we make, the day-to-day lifestyle decisions, without the doctor, without the drugs, we have more power over our bodies in a day-to-day way. Now, I'm not talking about repair. I'm not talking about emergencies. I'm not talking about infections. But in a day-to-day way, if you have diabetes, if you have autoimmune diseases, if you have cancer, if you have psoriasis, if you have rosacea, this is the most powerful idea that you'll hear. By leveraging the life force, you could have way more benefits. You want to prove it to yourself? Get yourself a blood pressure cuff. If you have high blood pressure, get yourself a blood pressure cuff and just sit on a couch and breathe and practice your SDR breathing. Do it correctly. It won't cost you a penny. You'll feel great. You'll add years to your life, and proof your blood pressure will drop. Take a warm bath. Watch your blood pressure drop. Blood pressure is an ideal marker because blood pressure goes up when we're not healthy. Doctors have a thing called essential hypertension. There's a diagnosis, essential hypertension. 80 million people in America, maybe more at this point, have essential hypertension. You have essential hypertension, guess what? You're going to get a beta blocker. Essential hypertension is defined as hypertension with no known cause. That's what the doctors say, no known cause. We have no idea what it is, so it's essential. Deep breathing will lower your blood pressure faster with no side effects and no toxicity than any beta blocker or calcium channel blocker, which are among the deadliest of drugs. Now, if you're way down the road in a disease process, and I get notes from people who are way down the road, it's going to take longer to resolve your disease process, but the good news is you can begin, and you have to start somewhere. You can begin immediately. Yes, it may look like, it's overwhelming. And some of the notes I get look overwhelming, but you start somewhere. Everything starts with a choice, with a decision. You make one decision, then you make another decision, then you make another decision. You do it one after another, after another. If you look at all of the breakdowns, and sometimes people have 10 or 12 or 15 different breakdowns, blood pressure and kidneys and skin and chronic fatigue and mental health problems and digestive problems. Sometimes there's like a whole complex web of various breakdowns in the body and various symptoms in the body, and it looks overwhelming. I understand, but you start somewhere. You take one step, and the easiest step is going to involve food, and that's usually the most important step, and that's the one we have the most resistance to. All right. I'm Pharmacist Ben. 844-236-6010 is our number. 844. I was going to tell you that story about the Prozac and the nurse. I forgot to do that. I'll do that when I come back from our break, and then we'll take your phone calls. 844-236-6010. You're listening to The Bright Side. We'll be back right after this. We're back on The Bright Side, and I think we're going to get Dr. Dalrymple. He's finally sent over his number, and I'm very excited to speak with him. Dr. Dalrymple is right in line with everything we're talking about here today in all of his books. He talks about taking personal responsibility for our decisions and political correctness and actual flat-out manipulation in medical journalism. In the injection of memes. He doesn't say this, but this is kind of what he's talking about, the injection of memes into the culture. And I'll see if we can, we're trying to get Dr. Dalrymple up. We'll get you a few of your calls here. In the meantime, let's go to Ken in Washington and say good morning. What's up, Ken? How you doing? Ken? Do we have Ken? Hello, Ken? All right, I'm going to put Ken back on hold because I can't hear him. Let's go to Chris in Florida. Say good morning. What's up, Chris? How you doing?
I'm well, Ben. Well, in reference to my call at the end of your show last Friday,
okay.
Bob called in yesterday. Bob called in at the end of yesterday's show and said to not trust the official statistics from the EPA or government.
Okay.
And I hope I made my skepticism of their statistics clear when I pointed out that they don't even mention that water vapor as a greenhouse gas is when it's the most
impactful. You did say that.
Yeah, and it's the most impactful, yet the EPA doesn't even mention water vapor. But of course, if someone tries to combat water vapor, they'd appear to be mentally unstable. So when debating, it's important to cite in your debate the factual basis for the opponent's argument and point out whether it's questionable.
Ken, listen, Ken, you got a lot of good stuff to say, and I want to hear it. But unfortunately, we have fortunately, Dr. Dalrymple has called in. So I know I got a full board here. A bunch of people want to talk to us this morning, and I apologize to all you guys. Call back tomorrow, and we'll get you up. And if we have to, we'll start taking calls earlier in the program. So everybody who's on hold,
all right.
I apologize, Ken. Thank you. But I'm really excited to talk to Dr. Dalrymple. I've been talking about him all morning today. And Dr. Dalrymple is a prolific writer. He has got so many wonderful things to say that are right in line to this whole concept and topic that we've been discussing, meme versus mechanism. The idea that we operate on belief systems and institutions encourage us to operate on these belief systems for their profit, in their interests a lot of the time. Sometimes it's misguided, but sometimes it's also manipulative and insidious. And in his books, he has a lot of books, but two of them, False Positive, A Year of Error, Omission, and Political Correctness, the New England Journal of Medicine, and Admirable Evasions, How Psychology Undermines Morality. Dr. Dalrymple talks about this idea that we are discouraged from taking personal responsibility, and our ideas and our beliefs are manipulated and controlled by vested interests that are not our human interests, they're institutional interests. So please welcome to the bright side Dr. Theodore Dalrymple. Hello, Dr. Dalrymple.
Hello.
Greetings. Your work's wonderful, and it's right in line with what we're talking about here today. The knife went in, you said. You remember that on the video?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
The knife went in.
Well,
that sums it up.
I worked, as you probably know, I worked as a doctor in a prison for quite a number of years. And when I asked people who had stabbed someone to death, I noticed that they always said the same thing, which is the knife went in. So it was the knife, as it were, that guided the hand rather than the hand that guided the knife. So they were trying to distance themselves from, I suppose they were trying to distance themselves from their responsibility for what they had done, as we are all, of course, inclined to do sometimes.
Well, talk about that. Why are we inclined to do that? What is it about human nature, about our brains, about our hardwiring, about evolution that encourages us to not blame ourselves or to scapegoat, to look for something that's...
Well, I suppose it's, as I said, it's human nature. I mean, I don't know about you, but the first thing I do when I know I've done something wrong
is blame somebody else.
I try to find excuses for myself.
Yeah, I noticed once.
And I say things like, "Oh, I was very stressed, or I was in a hurry, or something, some fatuous reason like that," and it's only a bit later that it's odd because one knows that what one is saying is an excuse. It's not really true, but it's only a bit later that one.
It's an instinct. It's like a reflex.
The excuse, yes.
Yeah, it's like I notice when I spill something, reflexively, who put that there? Reflexively, and then a second later, I say, okay.
What a bad glass.
What's that?
What a bad glass, the glass isn't properly made. There's a crack in the glass or something like that.
Yes, the glass. Yes, exactly.
So you always, the first thing is always to seek.
It's a reflex.
To seek the blame to place somewhere else other than oneself. But
here's,
of course, the speed with which one overcomes that inclination is very important.
That's critical thinking. Here's the real problem, as I see it, and as you see it as well, is that instinct, that reflex is manipulated. It's taken advantage of by vested interests, and that's where it becomes where it becomes problematic.
Yes, I mean, of course, people are encouraged to think like that. Yeah. So that, for example, I only half seriously said that one of the causes of crime is criminology, which encourages people not to think of themselves as agents, but as kinds of vectors of forces, so that they will reflect back to someone else what they have been encouraged to think by sociologists, by criminologists, psychologists, and so forth.
So are you familiar with the concept of memes? And are you familiar with the concept of memes? M-E-M-E, memes, like units?
Yes.
So we've been talking about this in the program, how there are meme masters who inject these ideas into the culture and then let them run amok, or let them run like a virus, just let them spread apart or spread out. And this idea of memes is how we make our decisions, based because of heuristics and mental shortcuts. We make our decisions based on these memes. How can we combat?
Although at the same time we know that many of them are nonsense. Let me give you an example of that. I once had a patient who was a prolific car thief. I think he'd stolen something like 600 cars. And he asked me whether I thought he was addicted to stealing cars. Now, it so happens that not very long before, in journals of psychology and criminology, the idea had been put forward that crime was a form of addiction. Or crime of this type, anyway, was a form of addiction. And it didn't take very long for this man to pick up that idea, even though, of course, he never read the journals of psychology or criminology, but nevertheless it seemed to have passed into the culture, as it were. So, I mean, I think that's quite a good idea. But it doesn't, on the other hand, it doesn't mean that he is not responsible for his acts just because he's picked up that idea. He knows perfectly well that each time he took a car, he made a decision to take a car, and he was perfectly capable of deciding not to take a car as well.
So is addiction a disease?
In my opinion, no. Of course there is. I wouldn't deny that there are physiological changes that occur with addiction, but those changes are actually very slight by comparison with other factors. So that the idea that addiction is simply a change in brain chemistry or something like that, I think is a gross oversimplification, and itself, if you like, is a kind of meme.
Doc, we're about to take a break, Doc, so hold on to that thought. Hold on to that thought, Dr. Daniel. All right, we're back on the bright side. We're talking to Dr. Theodore Dalrymple, prolific author, critic of the medical model, as we are on the bright side. He's written books about culture and about how the toxic cult of sentimentality in the book Spoiled Rotten, Admirable Evasions, which is about how psychology undermines morality and choice, and really wants to talk to you about romancing opiates. That's kind of another interesting book that you've written. And then if symptoms persist, just an amazing author and brilliant observer and critic of the medical model, maybe, and medical culture in general. Doc, before we went to break, you were talking about is addiction a disease? And you said that there were some physiologic correlates that are associated with addiction as non-dramatic, and that got me to thinking, what about the whole nature of diagnosing disease in general, the nature of diagnosis? Where does that play into our tendency to abdicate responsibility for our health challenges?
Well, particularly in the psychiatric field, it plays into it because, of course, in psychiatric diagnosis, there's very rarely any physiological correlate or any known, anyway, physiological cause. I mean, sometimes, of course, people under the influence of organic conditions which are provable do behave in very odd ways. But that is, by comparison with the amount of very dysfunctional behavior there is, this is a very small part of the explanation of dysfunctional behavior.
So in psychology and psychiatry, I mean, you make a really compelling case for, the way I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, really not even needing psychiatry if we make correct personal choices.
I wouldn't go quite so far as that, but I think there's been a kind of psychiatric imperialism to make practically all forms of human, or many forms of human behavior into disease.
Medicalization.
And the DSM-5 in particular, I added up all the prevalences of the diseases that, or disorders that were given, and it comes out that the average person in the Western world suffers or can suffer from, on average, 2.5 psychiatric conditions a year. And this strikes me as absurd and rather bad, because people are inclined to blame their disorderly behavior on some condition that has been diagnosed. But if you went to a psychiatrist, it's almost certain that you could get a diagnosis, or you would get a diagnosis, because amongst other things, in America anyway, he wouldn't be paid if he didn't give you a diagnosis.
Dr. Dalrymple, I think you have opposition defiance disorder.
I do, yes. I also have another very severe disease, which unfortunately the DSM-5 doesn't recognize, which is obsessional book buying disease.
I have that too. Yes, I know that's not yet, but that's probably going to be in the DSM-6. I know internet shopping disorder. Internet shopping disorder made the DSM-5. I don't know if you know that. Are you familiar with Irwin Kersh's book, The Emperor's New Drugs? The Emperor's New Drugs. Irwin Kersh, he wrote a book called The Emperor's New Drugs, where he found that the psychiatric drugs were basically placebos and no more effective than placebos.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's. I don't think that is absolutely true, but certainly the antidepressants, which are been given out in such huge numbers, have at least a very considerable placebo effect. Part of that, of course, part of the reason for it was that trials in which these drugs were shown not to work, the results were not published, and therefore a misleading impression was given to doctors. But also, and I think more importantly, all forms of unhappiness are now diagnosed as depression, so that actually for many, many years I haven't actually heard a patient say he was unhappy. Every patient says, I am depressed. Yeah,
that's very interesting. That's a very interesting point. Now, I found the placebo effect to be kind of interesting, because that's sort of what you're talking about, is the ability of the mind to create things. And so instead of taking advantage of the placebo effect, we filter it out because we can't charge for it.
Yes, I mean, I think all doctors use the placebo effect, and in fact, it's a very good. I think there are, of course, great advantages to the placebo effect. Recently, my best friend's father was a doctor, and when he was practicing, doctors were allowed knowingly to give a placebo. That is something that they knew had no physiological effect. In fact, it's coloured water. But they're not allowed to do that anymore. So they have to give something which may actually have a physiological effect.
Yeah, I remember when I graduated pharmacy school, they had just stopped doing that, writing for placebos. But that's true. They were legally allowed to write for placebos here in this country as well. Now, how did you practice medicine, like regular medicine, like in the clinic and all that kind of stuff, I imagine, when you started, right?
I've been retired for quite a long time, actually. I've been retired for 14 years. So apart from a little bit of medico-legal work, I haven't done any medicine for quite a long time.
Well, you're an amazingly prolific writer. I hope you don't mind me just delving into a couple of your other books. Out into the Beautiful World, one of my favorites, because I tend to like the metaphysical side of medicine and health and wellness. And in this book, you talk about insects. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, it's a terrible thing to confess, but I write so much I sometimes forget what I say or have said, except, of course, that it must be true. But I've long had a kind of non-entomological fascination with insects. I'm not an entomologist or anything like that, but I love observing insects. And where I live towards the south of France, there are many insects. But I don't know what else to say.
Well, you say you have a really interesting take. You say rather than study philosophy, you should have studied insects.
Yes, I say that because, of course, it would have given me positive knowledge, and I might have contributed some tiny little thing to the mountain of knowledge about something definite. I don't think I've really done that in my career.
Because you're so philosophical. Because you're so philosophical, you're saying. But I mean, I love it. You're thinking the big picture, and you're noticing trends, emergent patterns that are more metaphysical than physical, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yes,
especially
I
in
think.
medicine.
I hope I've observed things so that I don't know what your listeners will think of this, but I observed I think quite early on, the vast increase in the number of people who were tattooed, which struck me as a very interesting and important phenomenon.
Who were? I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Who were what?
Tattooed.
Tattooed. Oh, tattoos. Tattoos, like tattoos.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. So what does that mean? What occurred to you about that?
Well, at first I had a theory which I think cannot be true, actually, or is now not true. My first tattooing, at least in Britain, was always associated either with criminals or perhaps having been in the Navy or the Army. Anyway, they tended to be. Tattooed people tended to be marginalized or on the margins of society, and suddenly tattooing began to ascend the social scale, as it were, not as much as it has now. And so my first theory was that it was an attempt to identify with the marginalized people, so to show that you were politically virtuous. I sympathize with the downtrodden, and therefore I behave like the downtrodden, at least in this respect. But I don't think this can be true anymore, because about a third of American and British adults are now tattooed, apparently. So my theory, which might have fitted the epidemic, if that's what one wants to call it, early on, if it was ever true, can't really be true now. And now I suspect that it's an attempt to individualize yourself in circumstances where it's very difficult to be an individual. It's a kind of individualism without individuality.
I love it. I love it. Hey, we're out of time, Doc. It's been wonderful talking to you. Dr. Theodore Dalrymple, your work is amazing, and you're brilliant, and thank you for everything you do. It's just, your prolificity is very inspiring, and thanks so much for being on The Bright Side, Doc.
Thank you very much.
Have a beautiful day. That's Dr. Theodore Dalrymple, and you can Google him, and his books are wonderful. They're all over Amazon. He's a brilliant, brilliant observer of the medical model and of culture in general. Thanks for listening to The Bright Side, friends. I'm Pharmacist Ben. Have a wonderful, beautiful, awesome, spectacular day. We will talk to y'all later, folks. Bye for now.